Hey guys, welcome to the first rabbit trail video of the second lesson in our series. Now I want to start off by reading you a review of a movie, and I want you to tell me what movie they're talking about. It's pretty simple. It's the story of this ship that goes to another world, and this world that they go to is like unbelievably lush. It's just visually just stunning to see. And they go to this new world to mine some like precious resources and minerals that they have there. Now the main guy in the story, he encounters this like beautiful native girl, but she isn't really like sure about him until she gets like a message from this ancient tree that helps her trust him. Well, long story short, when his people come to attack the natives, he helps them drive them out, and then he becomes one with their people. All right? So tell me now, is that the story of, we'll say, Avatar? Or is that Disney's Pocahontas? Or is that the story of Ferngully, The Last Rainforest Family Fun Edition? We really don't know, because there's nothing in here that signals specifically which one of these stories it is, because it's pretty much the same story. So if we're to figure out like what exactly this is talking about, we have to look for other clues, like when this was written. See, if this was written back in 1992, then there's no way that this could be talking about Avatar. But what if this was written in 2010? Well, if say we found this on a website that talks about movies that are, in theaters now, probably talking about Avatar. But what if it's talking about like the best animated movies from the 1990s? Well, then it could be talking about either one of these two. And this becomes, this is just like, one story of, one review of a movie, so it's not that important. But it becomes extremely important when we begin to read scripture. Because if we think about it, the time span between those three movies was only 18 years. But that 18 years was enough to kind of throw us off and not really know. What's going to happen when we're starting to read texts that were written 4,000 years ago? We really need to be careful that we're not reading into it. Because in their day, they lived in what's called like the ancient mindset, and the way they thought and the way they looked at the world. This is kind of their view of reality, okay? And their view of reality was one where, again, we had a very dangerous world. We had a world where you need to know how to navigate life and how to deal with just devastating trials and situations when you had such a high death rate. So they really valued proverbial wisdom literature. They wanted texts that were going to be, psychologically discerning of the world around them so that people could make the right choices. And they wanted texts that would really help people be able to kind of psychologically, emotionally survive devastating trials that came upon them, right? So that was kind of the way that they viewed the world, almost like their glasses through which they saw the world. Well, let's flash forward now to the age of the Enlightenment. And we are really influenced by the age of the Enlightenment. We are like the children of the Enlightenment. Now, the Enlightenment valued reason. It valued, something that you could prove, whether it was like the value of a text was based on how like historically accurate it is. The more historical accuracy it had, the more value it has. Same thing with like if it's scientifically verifiable or reproducible, the more verifiable it is, the higher value we place upon it, okay? So we're dealing with the difference of true versus truth. They cared about truth. These people cared about, is this true and accurate, okay? So then flash forward to our time. Now we're living in a world that's like a post-modernity, like a postmodern world. What post-modernity is, we're still trying to figure it out. We won't figure it out in our lifetime, but they'll look back on it, and some of the things that they'll see as like hallmarks of it is like relativism and universalism. Pretty much, there's no specific like right and wrong. It's all of it's really relative based on the way you're looking at it and your like cultural influences. And that's the other thing that we're really influenced by is like all of our cultural influences, whether we have like, we have national identities, no matter what nation we're in, we're really influenced by those. We have political biases, whether, the way we read something is going to be totally different depending on where we're coming from. And we also have like a unique family influences. You could have like two families living on the same block in two different houses, and their view of the world could be completely different, all right? So what's going to happen when we come to a text that was written in this time period? Like say this is Genesis 1. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and we have day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Well, remember, they value like proverbial wisdom. They value texts that would like have like truth and symbol in them, and ways that you can kind of help people view the world, right? So they're looking at this like this, right? Well, then we come along, and we're kind of, influenced by the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment, keys us in. The glasses that we see the world through the Enlightenment is, oh, okay. So we're reading a text here that's about, it starts talking about, in the beginning, day 1, 2, 3. All right, this is history. So we place value on this text by saying how historically accurate it is. It talks about the creation of the world, science. We immediately think science. So how scientifically verifiable is it? How accurate is it? And so what we start doing, if we're not careful when we come to these texts, is we'll start applying our cultural standards on top of the text and begin distorting them in a sense. But then we also, again, have our own, like, relativism, universalism. We have our own cultural influences. And by these cultural influences, we will also judge the text. And we will also read into the text. And so here, boom, this is what it looks like when we start reading a lot of these texts if we're not careful. Because if we're not careful, everything that we value and we know and we've been trained to look at will so cloud the text and so distort them that we won't know how to read them. Which, of course, begs the question, how are we supposed to read these texts? Because since Genesis 1 was written, like, say, 2,000 years BC, there's no way that it could have been answering the questions of scientific accuracy or answering the questions of historical accuracy. And so if we begin demanding of that text that it answers the questions of science and answers the questions of history, then we begin to distort that text, and we no longer can glean the wisdom from that text because we're totally distorting it. So if we put that down and put on the glasses of the ancients, what the heck is going on in these texts? Well, to explain that, I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of a teaching method that Jesus used in his day. In his day, one of the most effective ways that he spoke to crowds was he would use parables. A parable is like to cast beside, something that's very similar. What he would do is he would use either a familiar situation or a familiar story to kind of like draw the listener in, like, oh yeah, I know what's going to happen, I know what's going on here. And then right when he has the listener, right when he has them where he wants them, then he totally like twists and turns the story in a direction that they did not expect. An example of that is a Good Samaritan. Now, the audience that he was speaking to, Samaritans weren't good. They were the bad people. They were the enemy. So for him to like draw them into a situation where, oh, we know what's going to happen next. Oh, now the Samaritan's coming. Uh-oh, this is bad. And all of a sudden the Samaritan acts good. Whoa. At the same time, that story became like repulsive to them and also very intriguing to them. And so it really got them thinking and really began like shifting their theology. Well, we have something very similar in Genesis 1. You see, at that time in kind of like the Mesopotamian area, every nation had its own creation myth, and a lot of them were very similar. And so what happened was they took the typical form of these creation myths, and they used that typical form to kind of draw the listener in. Oh yeah, I know the story of creation, I know what's going on here. But then at very key moments, they would flip the theology of it and kind of change like where the people expected they were going, total twist in the story. And that again would kind of like open them up theologically and be like, oh wait a minute, this is totally different. Again, be repulsive but also very intriguing to them. Here's an example. The Babylonian creation myth was called the Enuma Elish. Now let's compare that myth to the story in Genesis. The Enuma Elish starts with a divine spirit and cosmic matter that were both coexistent and co-eternal. So the gods and the earth, or the matter of the world, the physical world, were just coexistent. All right, divine spirit, guess what happens in Genesis? There's a divine spirit, but it creates the cosmic matter. And it actually acts and exists independent of it. So that's a total like twist right at the beginning of the story. So then it goes on, and here's what the Babylonian myth happens. There's primeval chaos, and the Tiamat is enveloped in darkness, like the earth, right? Earth was a desolate waste with darkness covering the deep. Exact same story, right? Here we go. Light emanated from the gods. Light created by God. Twist. Here we have creation of the firmament, dry land, luminaries, and man. In our story, firmament, dry land, luminaries, and man. In their myth, it ends with the gods rest and they celebrate. Ours ends with God resting and then sanctifying the seventh day. So you see, what Genesis 1 is not a historical record, it's not a scientific record. It's taking a story that they're very familiar with, like say the tortoise and the hare, but what it's doing is turning it theologically to help them understand who God is and how He works in the world, and help break the kind of the pagan inaccuracies and misunderstandings of the divine. Now I understand that like a lot of these concepts that I'm laying out in this series are totally like rattle our minds and rattle like what we have and what we think we understand of our theology. I mean, that's why this stuff totally rocked my world when I started studying it, and I just couldn't get enough of it. It's like, this is like the parables where, you know, at the same time, it's very disturbing because it didn't fit my theology, but at the same time, it was also very intriguing, so I wanted more of it and more of it. And so I want to encourage you two things as we continue on in this study. The first is that when I lay out these concepts, and some of them seem like, oh, I don't know if I quite believe that, that's fine. I'm not asking anyone to believe anything that I'm saying in this series. I just want to get it out there and let you guys mull over it and think about it and ponder it and do further study on it. Because I'm sure there's more that's been written on it that I haven't even seen yet. So totally like welcome and encourage comments, and I welcome like, you know, feedback, and oh, you should check out this too, and oh, check out that too, because this will also add, you know, further like dimension to what you're understanding on things. Man, I'm totally open to that. And the second thing is, I really want to encourage you to have the confidence that nothing that I'm saying in this series I'm just like throwing out there. Everything, every concept that I'm bringing out here, there's a lot of study behind it. There's a lot of like, in my own way, like verification of that. Yeah, this does seem like the right way to read it, the clean way to read it. This does seem verifiable across all of Scripture, that this is a principle that you know, that is like biblical in a sense. So as we're going through this series, you know, it's going to be challenging, but hey, this is a good thing, because constantly we have to be like relearning our faith. And as we do that, we grow into ever deeper understandings of who it is that we worship and who it is that loves us. So let's continue on. This next rabbit trail video is going to be really challenging, but I think it's like one of the most powerful concepts for us to understand. Let's get into it.